So I have to ask today, what type of faith do you have? We hear a snippet from the story of Job. And in this story, God and Job end up discussing, if you will, the nature of faith. Job's faith was anchored in an ancient framework, a legalistic framework about what was right and what was wrong. Those who were righteous, who followed God's commandments, were rewarded in this life. They could expect good health, great wealth, and other blessings. Those who sinned, on the other hand, who disobeyed God's commandments, could expect illness, poverty, and all manner of woes to visit them. In short, people would reap what they sow. And so, if your life met with tragedy, it was assumed that either you, your father, or perhaps your father's father, or even your father's father's father, had sinned against God. With this as the backdrop, the book of Job becomes like a Shakespearean play, and at the beginning, the audience knows what Job does not, that God and Satan enter into the deal to test the faith of humanity, specifically Job's faith. In a faith based in a legalistic framework, the question came out, can a righteous man maintain his faith when bad things happen? And so, bit by bit, Job loses everything. His flocks are stolen, his servants murdered, his children killed, and his health is ruined. In the end, he sits among the ashes with sores all over his body. Job, for his part, cries out to the Lord. Job knows that he is a righteous man. Job cries out that he is innocent. He has not sinned. And in this framework, he wants a court to question to God, because he knows if he goes into a court and God is the judge, that he will be found innocent, for he is righteous. If he only could find a way to plead his case to God. This type of faith lives today in different versions. Sometimes we call it the prosperity gospel. If you listen to TV evangelists, you will hear this type of faith. If you are rich and well off, certainly it is because God has rewarded you because of your faith. Likewise, if you are someone who is poor, if you do not have enough to eat, if you do not have shelter over your heads, then obviously you have done something wrong. It is your fault. And sometimes we hear this language by Christian politicians who cry out about those who flee war-torn lands or violence against their families, who run from the loss of crops due to drought or loss of land due to climate change. Certainly they have sinned. Certainly they are getting what they deserve. This type of faith knows that those who are seeking a better life for themselves and their families, who show up at our borders, are really just sinners, criminals. They are waiting to infest our society. Is this your faith? Job stands in, and he is about to plead his case to God, and he is expecting that he will be returned to wealth. And the snippet of our reading today comes at the end, where God is answering back to Job. And out of the whirlwind, the chaos, out of all that is of the world, God comes and says, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge. In other words, dear Job, I hear your words, but they betray a total and utter lack of understanding of me, your God, and the faith that I am calling you to embrace. You, Job, have set up an image of faith that mirrors the sin of humanity. You have set up a world of winners and losers. Who are you to confine faith to such a small box? Were you there at the beginning of time, asked God? Were you there at the foundations of the world? God is saying to Job, you who have great wealth and believe that such goodness testifies to your faith, you have not understood. You who have health and who have children who love you and believe that such goodness testifies to your faith, you have not understood. You who would blame others for their misfortunes of life, for their poverty, for their starvation, for their diseased bodies, and believe that such tragedy testifies to their lack of faith, or the sin in an American culture of their lack of work ethic, you have not understood. God is not a system of concrete rewards and punishment. God is not a system where what is legal is the measure of God. For the measure of what is legal is the measure of human sin, corrupted by sin. What is legal is not necessarily what is of God. So God says to Job, now hear me. You asked for a courtroom, but I give you the whole of creation. For those of us who are comfortable with a small faith, with a faith that can be put in a box of our own design, this is no answer at all. We may find ourselves wondering what God just did. The faith that God calls us to is not to our own boxes, but is built on the foundation of the entire universe, of the entire cosmos. The faith that we are called to is greater than anything you or I can put into words. The faith that God calls us to moves beyond our limits and our language. It calls us to embrace the vast, immense mystery that is God. We are called to a faith that sees the world as God sees the world, not as we do. We are called to a God whose depth and breadth is larger than we are, and that permeates all life, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There is no person, no situation where God will not be in the midst. We are called to move beyond what is known to us and what is comfortable for us. It says in the gospel that Jesus stood up and said, let us go across to the other side, to that foreign land, to that land of Gentiles, to that land of the unclean. Let us go there in faith. Not a courtroom faith, not a faith of winners and losers, not the faith that would seek to subject or oppress, not a faith whose modus operandi is that of the conqueror. No, let us go forth with faith in a God of love. We are told the sea rises up and the great storm threatens to envelop them, and they are afraid. As the metaphor goes, this is apt. Moving across the sea, moving to what is unknown and unfamiliar, always comes with fear and trepidation. What will it be like? Will I have to eat strange food? How will I find shelter? Will they accept me? Will I be able to pray like I have always done? What new things will I have to accept? how will I need to change? The fears are palpable. The fears are normal for all of us. It is what we do as humans in the face of uncertainty and the unknown. We fear. And so the disciples feared. They wake up Jesus and complain, "How can you be so indifferent to our fears? How can you simply just lie there?" And Jesus, unlike many other places in the gospel, does not say, "Don't be afraid." He understands there are fears. Rather, he says to them, "Peace, be still." And then, as the calm takes hold, he questions them. "Why were you afraid? Have you no faith?" In other words, do you still not understand the God of love? We have a collect that we say in baptisms and ordinations. It is a collect that I think describes this God of love and what we are called to. Let the whole world see and know that things which were being cast down are being raised up, and things which had grown old are being made new, and that all things are being brought to their perfection by the one through whom all things are made. This is the faith of the God of love. It is the faith that rests on the whole universe. This is the God that calls us to the other side, to the places that are uncomfortable and outside all of our tiny boxes. This is the God who will stand with every living human being, whose kingdom promises abundant life, not just to some, but to all. This is the God who asks us to give up our world of winners and losers, to seek God's kingdom. This is the God who says we are to stand with and among the least of the least. It is the God that asks us to stand in love, not in what is legal. It is the God who calls us to step out of the boat and into the storm. It is the God who forever calls us to love and serve the world. It is the God that stands up in the midst of all that we fear and says, "Peace, be still." Amen.